My name is Ashley Montgomery, and I'm about to share something that completely transformed my understanding of how music affects our souls. What I experienced during my clinical death has forever changed how I view the entertainment choices we make every day. I never imagined that my ordinary Tuesday morning would end with me lying on an operating table, my heart stopping for 7 minutes, and receiving profound revelations about the spiritual realm that would shake me to my core. I was a music teacher at Lincoln Heights Elementary School, dedicated to introducing young minds to the beauty of melody and rhythm. Like most people, I was deceived into thinking some secular music could be harmless. I had convinced myself that as long as the lyrics weren't explicitly sinful, the music was acceptable. How terribly wrong I was. It started as a typical morning in September. I had just finished my first class of the day when I felt an unusual tightness in my chest. At first, I dismissed it as stress or perhaps too much coffee. But within minutes, the pain became unbearable, radiating down my left arm. I barely managed to press the emergency button in my classroom before collapsing. The last thing I remember was the concerned face of our school nurse hovering over me, her voice seeming to come from increasingly far away. Then everything went black. What happened next was more real than anything I've ever experienced in my physical life. The moment my heart stopped, I felt myself being gently lifted from my body. There was no tunnel of light like I'd heard others describe. Instead, I found myself in what I can only describe as a vast space of pure consciousness, where thoughts and reality merged into one. A presence approached me, not with physical movement, but with an overwhelming sense of love and authority that I instantly recognized as divine. Though I couldn't see a definite form, I knew without doubt that I was in the presence of a heavenly being. The communication wasn't through words as we know them, but through pure understanding that flooded my consciousness. Ashley, the being communicated, you have been brought here to understand a truth that affects countless souls. Watch and learn. Suddenly, I was shown what looked like streams of energy flowing between heaven and earth. These streams represented the connection between God and human souls. What astounded me was how these connections were affected by different types of music. It was like watching a cosmic dance of cause and effect, but instead of physical movements, I was seeing spiritual realities. The being showed me something that made me tremble in my spiritual form. Secular music, all of it, was actively interfering with the divine connection. It wasn't just about the lyrics. The very structure of worldly music was designed to pull souls away from God. I watched in horror as seemingly innocent pop songs created dark static in the golden threads connecting souls to heaven. Understand this truth, the being communicated. Secular music is not neutral. It serves a purpose, to dull the soul's sensitivity to divine things and strengthen its bondage to the world. I was shown how different types of secular music affected the soul. Pop music created a constant buzz that drowned out the gentle voice of the Holy Spirit. The repetitive beats and worldly melodies programmed souls to crave earthly pleasures rather than heavenly joy. Each song acted like a spiritual anesthetic, numbing the soul's ability to sense God's presence. Rock music generated chaotic spiritual frequencies that disrupted prayer and meditation. Its very rhythm was designed to override the soul's natural God-given harmony. The aggressive beats and discordant sounds created spiritual static that made it nearly impossible to hear God's gentle whispers. Electronic music's artificial sounds and synthetic rhythms functioned like spiritual interference, scrambling the soul's ability to tune into heaven's frequency. The mechanical nature of these sounds worked against the organic, living connection God designed for our souls. Jazz, with its complex improvisations, led souls into a maze of worldly creativity that moved them further from divine simplicity and truth. The unpredictable rhythms and meandering melodies pulled attention away from heavenly order, replacing it with earthly chaos. Even instrumental secular music carried this spiritual interference. The being showed me how worldly compositions, though skillfully created, were born from minds attuned to earthly frequencies rather than divine inspiration. These compositions served as subtle barriers between the soul and God. "Look carefully," the being instructed, showing me scenes from everyday life. I saw people trying to maintain a prayer life while regularly consuming secular music. Their prayers struggled to reach heaven, like weak signals trying to penetrate thick interference. The more secular music they consumed, the weaker their spiritual reception became. What shocked me most was seeing how even occasional exposure to secular music could damage spiritual sensitivity. It wasn't just about quantity. Even brief exposure to worldly music could take days of spiritual cleansing to overcome. Each worldly song left a residue on the soul that dimmed its ability to perceive spiritual realities. The being showed me the truth about positive or clean secular music. The enemy's greatest deception is convincing souls that some worldly music is harmless. All music that does not flow from divine inspiration serves to separate souls from God. I watched in horror as popular music's influence spread like a spiritual plague. In homes, cars, stores, and even some churches, worldly music was constantly working to weaken humanity's connection with God. The being showed me how this musical bombardment was part of a calculated strategy to keep souls spiritually dull and worldly minded. Then the being showed me the contrast, the power of truly sacred music. Traditional hymns, Gregorian chants, and genuine worship songs created beautiful resonances that strengthened the soul's connection to heaven. These melodies weren't just sounds. They were spiritual technologies designed to align our hearts with God's presence. I witnessed how sacred music created patterns of light in the spiritual realm. Pure worship music, untainted by worldly influences, formed bridges of light between earth and heaven. These songs weren't entertainment. They were holy instruments designed to facilitate divine communion. The being then revealed something crucial about modern worship music. Not all songs about God carry his authority. Many are contaminated by worldly musical patterns that undermine their spiritual effectiveness. I was shown how some contemporary worship songs, despite their sincere lyrics, carried worldly frequencies that actually hindered deep spiritual connection. What I saw next brought me to tears. The being showed me how children's souls were particularly vulnerable to music's influence. Modern children's music, even when educational or seemingly innocent, was programming young souls to resonate with worldly frequencies instead of divine ones. Each exposure to secular children's songs made it harder for them to develop spiritual sensitivity. The being explained, "The enemy targets the young, knowing that early exposure to worldly music creates spiritual calluses that can last a lifetime." I saw how children raised on secular music struggled to develop genuine spiritual awareness, their souls already tuned to Earth's frequencies rather than heaven's. I was then shown the devastating impact of background music in public spaces. Shopping centers, restaurants, and offices that played secular music were unknowingly creating spiritually toxic environments. People exposed to this constant stream of worldly frequencies experienced a gradual deadening of their spiritual senses. The being then revealed something about rhythm that particularly disturbed me. Certain beat patterns in secular music were specifically designed to disrupt the soul's natural harmony with God. These rhythms, far from being neutral, actively worked to establish patterns of worldly attachment in the listener's spirit. I witnessed scenes from church history where early believers understood these truths. They carefully guarded their communities from secular musical influences, recognizing that spiritual purity required musical purity. Over time, this wisdom was lost as the church gradually compromised with worldly music styles. The being showed me how different generations were affected by secular music's evolution. Each new musical trend moved further from divine patterns, creating increasingly effective barriers between souls and God. What seemed like cultural progress was actually spiritual regression. I was shown how secular music affected different aspects of spiritual life. Prayer became shallow and difficult, as souls tuned to worldly frequencies struggled to connect with heaven's wavelength. Bible reading lost its spiritual power, the words failing to penetrate hearts desensitized by worldly music. Worship became more about emotional experiences than genuine spiritual connection, as souls conditioned by secular music sought entertainment rather than God's presence. The being then revealed something crucial about silence. In a world saturated with worldly music, silence becomes precious spiritual medicine. I saw how periods of musical abstinence could help restore the soul's sensitivity to God's frequency. I witnessed how secular music addiction worked in the spiritual realm. People became dependent on constant musical stimulation, their souls unable to find peace in holy silence. This addiction to worldly frequencies made it increasingly difficult for them to experience God's presence. The being showed me the future, how understanding music's spiritual properties would become crucial for maintaining faith in an increasingly hostile world. Those who clung to secular music would find their spiritual lives growing weaker, while those who embraced sacred music would experience deeper communion with God. Just before my return, I received a final warning. The time is short. Help souls understand that they cannot serve two masters. They cannot maintain spiritual sensitivity while feeding on worldly music. Suddenly, I felt a pull back toward my body. The transition was gentle, but swift. I opened my eyes to find myself in the hospital, surrounded by medical equipment and concerned faces. The doctors later told me I had been clinically dead for 7 minutes due to a massive heart attack. That was 3 years ago. Since then, I've completely eliminated secular music from my life. The clarity this has brought to my spiritual walk is profound. I now understand that there is no such thing as neutral music. It either draws us closer to God or pulls us away from Him. There is no middle ground. I've carefully studied scripture and early church teachings, finding numerous references that align with what I was shown. The early church fathers understood these truths and warned against the spiritual dangers of worldly music. Their wisdom, largely ignored today, has been validated by my experience. The changes in my spiritual life have been revolutionary. Prayer has become deeper and more natural. Bible reading is more powerful and clear. My ability to sense God's guidance has sharpened dramatically. Even my teaching has transformed. I now help my students understand music's serious spiritual implications. My home has become a sanctuary of sacred sound. I only play music that genuinely connects with heaven's frequency. Traditional hymns, sacred classical pieces, and carefully selected worship songs that maintain pure devotion to God without worldly influence. I've witnessed the impact of this understanding on others who have embraced it. Those who eliminate secular music from their lives consistently report deeper prayer lives, clearer spiritual discernment, and stronger connections with God. The difference is dramatic and undeniable. This truth isn't popular, even among Christians. Many resist the idea that their musical choices could be spiritually damaging, but I can no longer stay silent. What I experienced was too real, too important to ignore. Souls are at stake. My mission now is to help others understand this vital truth. Secular music, regardless of its style or seeming innocence, is a tool designed to weaken our connection with God. The only truly safe path is to fill our lives with music that flows from genuine divine inspiration. I share this testimony with urgency and love. The time for musical compromise is over. Each song we listen to either strengthens or weakens our connection with heaven. The choice is ours, but the consequences are eternal. If you're reading this, I urge you to carefully examine your musical choices. Don't be deceived by the world's claim that some secular music is harmless. Every worldly song, no matter how innocent it seems, works to dull your spiritual senses and weaken your connection with God. The journey of eliminating secular music isn't easy. The world's melodies can be addictive, and breaking free requires determination and God's grace. But the spiritual clarity and freedom that comes from listening only to heaven's frequencies is worth every sacrifice. Remember, this isn't about legalism or rules. It's about spiritual reality. Just as we protect our physical bodies from poison, we must guard our souls from music that weakens our connection with God. The choice is clear. We can feed our souls with heaven's frequencies, or slowly starve them with the world's counterfeits. My near-death experience revealed the destructive reality of all secular music. It is never mere entertainment, but a calculated spiritual weapon designed to separate our souls from God. Only music born of true divine inspiration can nurture our communion with heaven. May we all have the courage to choose wisdom over worldly pleasure, eternal perspective over temporary entertainment, and God's music over the world's seductive melodies.